Hello, I'm Mr. Cowan, and this is?
Hi, I'm Mrs. Blankenberg.
All right, so we are going to be moving into the next textbook, and we're going to be learning about the history of life on the planet. Okay, so that's our plan today. We're going to do an introduction here today, and it's going to be followed up with a little review, and we're going to give you some free answers or free questions that basically on the test. So it'll be worthwhile to pay attention, especially at the end here, to take some notes down, because you might see some of these questions on the future test or quiz.
So get those notebooks ready.
All right. So, and here we go. So, do you ever wonder why is there such a variety of life on Earth now, different, and why is it so much different than it was in the past?
I do wonder that, Mr. Cowan.
Excellent, so do I. What extinct organisms once lived in our area? What can be learned from studying a fossil? So we're going to be learning a lot about fossils. And we even have some that we can let you take a look at this year. All right. So if we take a look at some of the earliest life forms, you'll see that they look very alien to us, right? So this is some early life forms. And then, of course, you've all probably watched Jurassic Park or at least heard about it. So we have some that are fossilized in amber, some insects that are millions of years old in amber. And then we're going to learn a little bit about these early fish. So look at these early fish, and look at this really cool, basically like a skeleton over the top. And so they're pretty weird-looking early fish, very bony.
That does look very different than what I see today. All right, so taking a look at the Earth timeline, we have a really cool thing we're going to show you in just a little bit on this. Mr. Cowan's been busy. But if we think about the timeline, it's been around for a super long time, 4.6 billion years. That's right, with a B. How do we know so much about the history of life on Earth? Well, in this unit, you're going to learn how scientists use evidence found in fossils and rocks, and along with an understanding of natural processes and scientific principles to unravel the extraordinary mystery of how old the Earth really is.
Thanks to CuriosityStream for supporting.
All right. Next, we're going to be learning about some fossils. And here is a fossil of the Archaeopteryx, which is one of the more famous fossils, linking dinosaurs to birds. And then we'll learn about trace fossils. Look at these footprints. So think of ancient footprints from dinos. So these are two different kinds. We have mineralized basically fossils, trace fossils. So we're going to learn about that. And a fossil is a trace or remains of an organism that once lived on Earth, commonly preserved in sedimentary rock. So one of the most common is this stuff called sedimentary rock. And it looks like this. So as basically things die, they get buried under this sediment. The deeper they are, the older they are. And we're going to learn more about this in class, about Earth's age. And only a fraction of the species that we have ever lived are made into fossils. So we're going to learn about how rare it is for an animal to actually form into a fossil.
Which makes me wonder if all the animals that ever lived on Earth are fossilized. I wonder if that's true or not.
Excellent. We're going to get to that at the end of this slideshow. So scientists assume that the geologic events and phenomena that happen today also happened in the past and that they apply everywhere in nature. We can use these assumptions to interpret fossil data. So that means we know now how animals die and get buried by sediment. These processes have been happening for millions of years, for eons. So we can make some assumptions on how old something is based on that basically how these functions, these things take place on the planet even today. How do we know how old a rock is, Ms. Blankenberg?
Well, they can be dated. They are most often dated relatively, since it is difficult to date them absolutely, meaning we know exactly when and how old they are. They are compared against index fossils and igneous rock layers. So what scientists do is they can find an index fossil, which means it was really common around in a large area, but it was also around for a very short time. And then they can compare if they find a fossil, they think it's older or younger than that index fossil.
Excellent. Couldn't have said it better myself. So we're going to learn more about Earth's age, and evidence from absolute dating of these rocks indicates that Earth is around 4.5 billion years old. So when we do this timeline out in the hallway here in a little bit, and we'll do this in class, you're going to learn about some comparisons about how old Earth is on a timeline. Now we're going to dive right into some review questions that you're going to see at the end of this. So these will be little quiz questions, hint, hint.
Grab a pencil and your notebook because you want to write these down.
So let's say there was a mountain, and I'm climbing up the mountain, and I found a fish on the fossil on the top of the mountain.
I don't think fish live on mountains.
Well, they don't. So what would that tell me? Well, sometimes Earth's plates move, and what happens is it can shift and then erode, and I can find a fish on the top of a mountain once in a while that was on the bottom of an ocean. It would tell me that clearly that at some point, the bottom, that fish was at the bottom of an ocean, right? So maybe it shifted, other land eroded, and all of a sudden, hey, there is this fish fossil. All right, so we're going to go into how old a fossil is. All right.
Because you flipped around this picture.
I flipped this picture because you're going to see quizzes like this in the future, not just our grade, but this is a timeline, but it goes back in age this way. So sometimes in your head, you kind of flip things in age. So when I think of age of fossils, I know the older ones are on the bottom, right? The deeper they are, the older they are. And if I keep going up this way, it's basically the younger fossils. So for example, quiz question, it might say, which fossil is older, G or F? Well, this guy's deeper, right? So that would be a good answer. So the deeper the fossil is, the older it is. How does relative dating help us understand the age of a fossil? All right. Here's what it does. It tells us the age of a rock. And if the fossil is above that rock, we know it's younger than the rock. Therefore, we can determine its relative age. So we'll learn more about that in class. But let's say there's a rock right here, and there's a fossil above it, right above it. Well, I know it's younger than this rock, because there are some rocks we can be really accurate about their age, far more than we can with the actual fossils. So that's how we basically judge some age things. So, go ahead.
I was going to say, this picture, I feel like it's very familiar on a quiz. So which layer is older, B or D? So using what Mr. Cowan just explained, right, we know that the older fossil is going to be on the bottom because it is deeper. So we would be able to tell that the older fossils are down here, and then they get younger as they go up.
Excellent. All right. Here is the process of fossilization. And I will hint, you will see this on this future quiz.
Get your pencil.
Yep. They're going to be scrambled. So you're going to have to put them in this order. Step 1, an organism dies and is covered with sediment. Step 2, time passes and more layers of sediment build up. Step 3, minerals seep into the organism and replace it with stone. And then the last step, finally the organism turns into rock, turns into solid stone. Okay, so that's going to be the order when you see it on the quiz. Now, what are footprints called in fossilization? Does anybody want to take a stab at that?
Oh.
Answer is they're traces. They leave a trace. If you're a hunter, you could see a trace of an animal, like it was there because you've seen the trace of it. So they leave tracks.
Oh gosh, Mr. Cowan, what is that?
It looks like a giant turd from a dinosaur.
It is.
Wow. So in science, what do we call these? We call these fossils that are made from dino doo-doo, and they're called coprolites after this crazy scientist, Mr. Cope, but he is basically coined the term for coprolite fossils. In other words, dino poop. What can we learn about a dinosaur based on its turds? Any guesses? Well, if you really wanted to go into a raccoon's turds, you can tell what it ate, right? We can tell what dinosaurs ate based on their poo.
Fossilized poop. Doesn't get any better than that.
That's right. What organism is more likely to become a fossil? Well, we're going to learn in class this next week about how animals that die on land are often eaten by other things. And it's not as often that you're going to get buried and die in the right spot that you get buried. However, in the oceans or outside the mouth of a river, an animal might die and then get buried and buried and buried. And then all of a sudden we form this sedimentary rock. And basically we're going to learn about how we have a lot more aquatic, so water fossils, than we do on land. Those of you that hunt know that if the antlers fall off the deer, they're gone within a year. Other animals are eating it. And same with their skeleton and their bones. So you had mentioned this earlier.
Yes, I did. So,
Is the fossil record ever complete?
and the answer is no, not really, right? We're still always discovering more links to the fossil record and putting more pieces of the puzzle together. So I know there's a few kids in my class who really are into paleontology, right? Studying this. They're always going to be finding more and more, trying to figure out the history of our Earth through the clues of fossils.
Okay, so we are going to move on to the timeline, but just to be safe, we're going to pause this and do this in 2 parts.
Hi. All right. We are outside of Mr. Prohaska's door and Mrs. Simsek's door, and we are on an exciting journey through the history of time. Here we go. Your tour guide, Mr. Cowan.
Okay, disclaimer. We are more than 6 feet away, and basically that's why I have my mask off temporarily. And you will see that here is the early Earth. So planet Earth will be forming right about here. Then, shortly thereafter in geologic time, the moon forms. Okay, so the moon is basically starting to form. And then in Earth's time, look at, we have liquid water forming here in Earth's timeline. And let's see what happens on Earth next. We are coming down the timeline here, and we have the early atmosphere on the planet. So the early atmosphere is forming. And then look at, there's not a lot going on here.
Do you think this is going to be the dinosaurs coming next?
Well, sorry, the first living thing. Okay, so
Oh.
not super exciting yet. This is just the first living thing. Really boring thing, as a matter of fact. Just a unicellular organism.
Oh,
So
one
moving on,
cell?
look at nothing
Oh my
going on
God.
planet Earth. You're boring, boring,
Oh my
boring.
gosh.
So not much going on planet Earth. Look at that long
We're all the
distance.
way to Mr.
All
Cowan's
the way
room.
in my classroom. We finally get this buildup of oxygen. Early atmosphere was mostly carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and we needed some oxygen so that we could get some cool stuff to grow on the planet. Well, let's see what happens next. Wow, long time passes
That is a
between
long
some
time.
oxygen here. Look at this. We have the first eukaryotes. And if you remember from science, eukaryotes are just basically cells that have a nucleus and mitochondria and you basically endoplasmic reticulum, all that fun stuff you learned about. Then look at not much going on
Oh my
here.
gosh, I can hardly keep up with
on
you.
planet Earth. So pretty quiet period of time here.
But where's the dinosaurs, Mr. Cowan?
Oh my gosh. Look at this. What do we have here? Ooh, multicellular organisms are growing.
We're
So
not-
we have multicellular organisms. Then we have Mr. All right, but we have the Cambrian explosion. This is where we see a lot of life
Oh.
on the planet. Then we have the first land plants are starting to show up on planet Earth.
We just got to plants now?
So look at this, all the way back to Mr. Pro's room, and now we finally have the
Oh,
first.
there goes Mr. Sukawati.
amphibians.
He's part of the timeline too.
We have the first amphibians, trees, insects, and sharks. Then what do we have? Coal deposits. Then we have the first reptiles.
Ooh.
Then we have the earliest flowering plants. Then we have the first dinosaurs. Look at how long it took to get the first
Oh,
dinosaurs.
there they are. All the way down there.
Then what happens next
And
is
now we're
the
here.
first birds and mammals. Yay, mammals. We happen to be mammals. Wow, we really came up really late and came here. Then we have the dinos are dead. So the dinos are go
Oh my.
extinct right here.
They didn't last very long on
No.
the timeline.
Early primates. Okay, we happen to be primates, so they come about. And then this will be my end of the timeline, but in just if I could squeeze this into a centimeter, the last Neanderthal dies, the last mammoth and saber-tooth dies, and the rise of human civilization. So basically from here all the way down to Mr. Pro's room, everything has happened in this tiny little bit of present time.
In
All the
1
wars.
centimeter.
Everything is condensed to right here. All
Wow.
right, and we'll demonstrate this in class and walk this out as well.
And that, my friends, is the history of Earth in TJ's hallway.